Hi, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Just so you know, I don't expect a big audience because Christmas festivities are still going all around the world, the country, and everywhere. Okay, wondered how everyone will be decompressing. Some of us are so hungover that they don't even think they'll even touch alcohol again. Some of us didn't touch any. Then you had the few who thought that it was survivable these holidays. I can tell you now, I thought it was pretty survivable right up until about midnight last night. I didn't drink enough water. Too much vodka, not enough water to go down beforehand. Not a very intelligent move. I hope your one was much, much more better. But I did enjoy lots and lots of family fun, and the kids got to see everyone, and I managed to have a little bit of fun. So, this is there's going to be a few things that we discussed tonight. The upcoming election to begin with, and then many, many more things. I'm going to mute my phone because it shouldn't be making any noise. So, in this sort of freelancing sort of idea, thought we'd discuss how we were going to approach the upcoming election. But I've actually got some things that is like housekeeping details. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share with anyone you know. And in the new year, I will be getting a different setup, so I'll be able to share things and you'll be able to see whatever I see on my screen. So hopefully this will get better and better. I want to thank everyone for such lovely support in doing these live streams. I think it's a wonderful thing to have loads and loads of people that have sent me messages and well wishes to do with this particular live stream. I've enjoyed each and every comment, and I've thoroughly enjoyed your feedback. So, I think it's fair to say that it's time to get to why we got here. This year has been filled with a lot of stuff. Not like any others, anything comparable to 2020. I think 2020 and 2021 are definitely the outlier in how we normally view each year and even each political scope, because it's such a massive moment for countries like ours. There is a new litmus test in whether you can actually deal in real health crisis, after dealing with the many years of the LNP slashing the Medicare right to the bone. I think it's quite clear that we are definitely in need of a new government, one that will fund Medicare well and to the sufficient needs of dealing with this pandemic time now. So think of every political cycle as what's in it for you. Well, I think the biggest thing that's going to be in this political cycle for you, and watch, I will keep talking about it every week, the scape of healthcare every week, because I think going into these things, we are going to be more consumed with where our healthcare system is, not just for pandemic reasons, but for many other reasons. Many other people, because of COVID, did have to delay certain real issues that they had on hold, elective surgeries and whatever. And I think that that's really, really important. So I want up here at the top of your list to remember that there's only one party that has ever funded healthcare the way that you need. But what does that mean? Does it mean just rocking up to hospital and getting your needs taken care of? No, it also requires your GP services and your pharmaceutical needs. There is a PBS scheme that deals in how healthcare is dealt with. And remember, only Labor funds this stuff properly. And this idea that we are heading towards a Americanized system of healthcare isn't out of bounds anymore. Keep in mind that this isn't. This has been the conservative role in how they talk about this kind of stuff. And we shouldn't be surprised that they talk like this. Every conservative around the world doesn't think that you are entitled to decent healthcare. They not just decent healthcare, decent education, decent anything. They think that the top 1% are owed everything, and you just sort of over to the side, you pay your taxes. And that top 1%, they shouldn't pay anything in tax. That's part of the issue that we're sort of in right now, is that we've got this state of play where the big elitists don't want to pay anything in tax. They want you to pay for the tax bill, but they also don't want to provide any social services of that need, of that working class need. And they certainly don't want to deal with any real social issues like homelessness or a healthy welfare system, like anything that remotely makes the makes the country better and healthier as a whole. But keep in mind that this will be something that I think we're really, really going to need to keep discussing into the lead up of the election. I would heavily put pressure on anyone that you choose to vote for to talk about their healthcare policy. Their healthcare policy matters, because you can't have a good working class of people if they're not a healthy working class of people. So keep that in mind. So it essentially is in the best interest of the country to have a good, healthy healthcare system for the working class and for everyone else. It saves a lot of money overall. But I digress. Came here for a few little articles that we're going to discuss and more. I think that we're in very, very interesting times. And I think all of you hold the keys as to how to get out of this mess. I don't know how the Conservatives have panned out over the pandemic era. I think largely ones that have held to being half decent in the COVID pandemic have largely held their seats. But Scott Morrison should be thumped into next oblivion with all other Conservatives for their colossal handling of this. Don't get me wrong, some LNP premiers, which we will discuss later on, have handled this okay. But largely, again, I think this could have been done better. If we had a better Prime Minister, we would have had this top-down approach. Instead, we had this mumble-jumboed, different state approach where New South Wales was the cluster bugger-up of it all. But here we go. First article of the evening. I seen this and I was like, yeah, I'm in. So we've got an opinion from the placard at Christian Brown. This is written on the December 19th. Voters will reach a crossroads at the upcoming federal election. Will they return the federal LNP coalition government? First, how did we get here and what compels voters to vote for the LNP? It is necessary to devolve into the minds of conservatives. Conservatives generally believe the world is a dangerous place, regardless of their individual experience. So whenever the coalition government reaches for the Conservative handbook to manage unseen threats to the nation at the horizon, releasing critique media statements, knowing the Liberal leaners will turn to the Australian flag, mask wearing Prime Minister, the great protector of evil resonating with the vulnerable voters seeking assurance and security. It is highly effective messaging and persuading vulnerable voters to vote against their economic interests. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second and address that. Every conservative government that I have seen does largely base itself on fear. They do not govern in a way that makes you feel safe and secure. They make it feel like everything they do is based around how they can make you feel afraid. What does that look like? Well, it looks like this. See them people over the border, they're going to hurt you. Or see them people coming by plane, they're going to take their jobs off you. See the men around, we need to make sure that that all the bathrooms are kept separately. See that country overseas, we need to do something about that before it becomes our threat. This is how the Conservatives rule. They rule by making you look elsewhere. They don't rule in terms of real policy debate or anything that is manifestly beneficial to your outcome. There will never be a moment that I see this Conservative government overwhelmingly support anything that will help you and your family. You hear them steal parts of ALP policy, but they're not committed. You hear them talk about climate change, but they're not committed. You hear them say things, but nothing ever actually gets done. Like they were supposed to create this Great Barrier Reef Fund. No one's actually seen if the Great Barrier Reef is protected or how, what all that millions of dollars went to. That's an important moment. So spare me the egregious moment of thinking the governments across all political spectrum look after the people, because that's just inherently not true. Conservatives do not. They rule by fear. And they will tell you that there is something to fear at a continuous rate, where Labor will tell you what the real fear is. That when you rock up to a hospital, that there won't be enough funding for that hospital to treat you. They will tell you that teaching is understaffed and that they will fix it. They will tell you that the apprenticeship market needs boosting. They will boost it. Do you see the difference? They talk about things that can largely change how we view the economic pattern of our country and the well-being of each person in it, whether it's in healthcare, education, or just job training. It's super duper important that those things are covered. And housing affordability. Labor have always had an amazing housing affordability plan. But don't take my word for it. Take theirs. Take a moment to look at their moment to talking about housing affordability and what works for you. Last election cycle, they did want to tackle negative gearing and that sort of thing. So the first home buyer could get their first home rather than one of the big rich people getting their 10th home and being helped to get theirs. So the stark difference when we are talking policy differences is that when Conservatives are doing their fear and smear, Labor actually will come at you with real substantive policy difference and say, I'm more interested in if your kid has a teacher, that they can loan off. I'm more interested in if you can afford to live in your home. They're the sorts of things that you can starkly see. Uh, I don't know how a government should ever be allowed to be elected in scaring you into the idea that someone overseas is going to steal off you at all. That never should have happened. Labor has never really tipped their hat. Like, they don't do things like that. They go, no. The person isn't the problem from overseas. The person that's the problem is right here is our leaders. They're not helping you get a cheaper housing. They're not helping you in your Medicare struggles. They're not helping you in getting a job. And I think that that's largely to do with the way that we view the two political spectrums. And I mean, there isn't just traction for this here, it's all over the world. So, everything to the far right in France do this. That Marine Le Pen also had a very, very conservative view that if you took in more people, that suddenly there'd be less for everyone else. Like the economy was a piece of pie and you could just sort of carve out a bit. And if you helped anyone internationally, there would be less for you. No. If a government is good, it can take in a massive amount of immigration and still give you a good home to live in, support Medicare and education. Those are the facts. Helping people from overseas in poorer nations does not will ever make us poorer as a nation. If any conservative convinces you that helping someone that is fleeing a war-torn country, which we probably had a role in making their lifestyle worse off, if they told you that you couldn't get so many things because we're helping that person, it's a flat out lie. None of that will ever be true, as much as they want to salivate over the moment that it might be. But why do I say that? Because it's true. And I think that the dealing with the Bibella family in Queensland, from Queensland, is a perfect example of how they're treating that. They are torturing a family in Western Australia that's from Queensland purely because, and spending millions doing it, purely because Conservatives would rather that you fear this cute little family that worked hard here rather than dealing with anything of substance that they can bring to the table. It's outrageous. And if you buy it, I swear to God, you are being sold a lie. And not just a little lie, a monstrous lie. Immigration only makes our country stronger, better, and more sustainable as we grow. I can tell you my heritage is very rich with immigration. Not in recent years, but my heritage is definitely immigration. So I'm not going to be the one that goes, oh, I can have this different position. Of course not. My relatives definitely were immigrants. Definitely. I'm not a family tree analyst, so don't come at me with that. But I definitely have had family that are immigrants. And I think that that's an important tale to tell as we're all talking about what's going to happen this election cycle. Let's get back to the article. Oh, and do that. Okay. So, the LNP strategy consists of two phases. Here are the two phases in persuading vulnerable voters to vote against their own interests. First, the world we live in is full of threats. See, that's what I was talking about before. Secondly, the supporting leader is that the only way out of protecting themselves from the threats. That is so true. This is how they do it. They tell you, hey, no, you got to fear this other thing, and I'm your only rescuer. Trump attempted this. And he even went on this weird thing where he's like, I saved Christmas. Don't know what that is, dude. But I never ever heard anyone stop saying Christmas, whether however they wanted to. It was this weird flex I kept seeing over and over, like this savior complex that they needed to have this really narcissistic right wing leader just charging in to pretend like they're protecting you from some little family that came by boat. I mean, come on. Come on. That's not a threat to anyone. I don't think they're the biggest threat to our country. This whole falsehood of who's your enemy and who's not your enemy, and I'm the only one who can protect you. Dude, no, it's wrong and it's deceptive at its core. It has no place. To archive the phase, so the second phase, is to sure follow it. After all, Australia's Prime Minister is the only one informing the voters of the unseen threats. It makes sense to voters that will fall into line with its leader and the nation staring into the face of perceived threats, ranging from foreign military threats to domestic terrorism, exaggerated fears of minorities and immigrants, disease, violent crime, and government overreach. Oh, who remembers their attack on the Sudanese community in Melbourne? Who remembers how disgustingly gross Peter Dutton was? This idea that they perpetuate, like, nah, if you're of some different color, that somehow you've got this bigger crime rate, which is never true. Never ever true. It's not going to be true then, and it's not going to be true now. Why do I say that? Because inherently it's just not true. No matter which nationality you're from, I guarantee you, big or small, some part of you has been represented in the penal system. And white privilege definitely needs to be addressed in that. There is this unmitigated moment that if you're white, middle-aged and work, the court will address you better. It's definitely there. So spare me this fake crusade that Peter Dutton went on to attack our Sudanese families in this country. I will not have another hyper-driven moment, another election cycle where you have this weird moment of Peter Dutton screaming at people about people of colour being a threat to him. I've got a few words for Peter Dutton if he plans that. And I'm not far from that man's office. I wouldn't mind confronting him over his rhetoric around immigration, around people of colour, around our First Nations people. All of them matter the same way as his white Anglo ass. That's the issue, is that he doesn't care. He says it like verbal diarrhea and he just spews out and he doesn't care. But that part's important. It's important to you. It's important to me. And it should be important to your children, because your children will be playing with those kids in the playground. Is he saying them abhorrent things? Just remember, your kids are playing with those kids on the same soccer field. And they don't know that some monster Peter Dutton is running around telling them how brown people are awful. Nah. My children heard those statements because I'm very political, and of course they've heard the news. And they heard me just try and breathe through that disgusting rhetoric. It was hateful. It was vile. We've never treated our First Nations people properly, ever. And no conservative prime minister should ever put it up as like they're saving us from anything. If anything, Albo will be our savior. If anyone is going to have a real savior moment this election cycle, because I'm done with conservatives. They won't give you anything of substance. They're not going to hand you what you need to survive everyday life. See, and then they boost up the military threats and domestic terrorism and then pretend like they signed a $1 billion weapons contract with South Korea President Moon Jae-in. So this is how they do it. But not forgetting Morrison government increased military spending in the budget, allocating $34 billion for defense spending in 2021. $39 billion by the year 2023-2024, the biggest increase in defense funding since the Cold War. That matters. Why does that matter? Because while they're ripping out of healthcare, they're doing what the Americans do. They rip all the money out of healthcare and then they go, no. Who cares if you get sick and die? They're more concerned with if, they can make up these imaginary threats and boost up their defense forces. Again, don't take my word for it. Take theirs. It's all in the budgetary papers. These aren't like moments that they just forget. They know exactly what they're doing. This kind of spending means something. Okay. Magnifies our perception of a threat, whether the foreign aggressors, immigrants, terrorists, or expanding ideologies. Communism further bolstering Australia's security. Really? They're going to go with communism as a threat? Really? This nation is smarter than that. No. For all the idiocy in this world, our nation is not dumb enough to fall to the old, oh, look, the scary communists are coming. Who falls for that crap? It's unmitigated garbage. There's not even like a logical explanation for that. I can't think of one. Can you? Unbelievable. I nearly swore. Okay. Communism further bolstering Australia's security intelligence organisations with $1.3 billion to combat threats to national security. Wary voters have become accustomed to the LNP government's textbook response in changing the media narrative. See, I truly do not think a Conservative would get elected anywhere if we had a media that was not part of the 1%. If we had a media that was fair, balanced, and not these big multimillionaire conglomerates, I think that we would see a drastically different political landscape. Instead, we're left with this hellscape of depending on how the media perceives what Scott Morrison is doing. And if you notice, by and large, they will say things like, oh, look, they're better with money. No. We've gone over this 1 billion times. Just no. The Conservatives are never better with money. Don't take my word for it. Take theirs. They know it. Look at their budgetary differences. They're huge. They spend up big, sell up big, and then leave a mess for Labor to clean up. And then they point the finger at Labor and then go, oh, look what you did. No, dude. And the media promotes that like that's the reality that we all should all live in. Not again. We're not doing this. It's just not true. Um, and they give you this idea that a strong military is required to counter international world threats. It's weird, have you paused to think when Australia's evangelical prime minister tells voters he's on their side? It's a moment when religion overlaps government policy because religion is used as a coping mechanism in uncertain times. This is super important. I'm all for whoever you want to pray to, however you want to pray. However that looks like, I'm in. And I'm certain you're in as well. But I definitely don't want a guy consulting his religious leaders before experts. I definitely don't want a guy who does not take a pandemic seriously running our country, who thinks that you can pray the illness away or something ridiculous. It's definitely not in our interests. Definitely not. But don't take my word for it. Take theirs. They've showed you that they're saying those things. So this election, I want you to hear their words. Their words of unimaginable negligence. The citizens of the liberal democracy should never be fearful of what they believe in their lives or led by God they follow. Indeed, they should choose to follow one or acknowledge one at all. In my view, Australia's public is gullible and will swallow up the mainstream media narrative. Now, when they talk about the mainstream media narrative, there is a huge population that will look at a headline and then go, oh, must be true. The Daily Telegraph wrote it. That's a problem. That's a problem for you and it's a problem for me. So keep that part in mind. And committed to strategic partnerships. The timing of such a movement here, diverting the public's attention with billion-dollar defense deal with South Korea from the unfolding COVID crisis, the Prime Minister's home state in New South Wales, which recorded Australia's highest COVID cases in New South Wales, and it went ahead with a plan to stop wearing masks. And that included public transport, airports, and for unvaccinated hospitality staff. In a surprising move, dropped QR checking codes requirements for businesses, except high-risk venues like gyms, aged care, disability care facilities, hospitals, pubs, and clubs. Large outdoor music festivals, surprises have not stopped there. With New South Wales Health cutting the role of contact tracing, what? They did what? Nah. Did New South Wales cut its contact tracing? Oh, outrageous. It's basically just saying you're on your own. Look. That Dominic Perrott is as dangerous as a cut snake. I tell you now, he's more dangerous than the freaking Prime Minister. No. And we didn't even rely on him for that much. No, we thought Gladys was like the the little shark bait moment. We honestly thought that she was like leading people to sharks. This idiot here is leading us into like a sharks with crocodiles and deadly snakes sort of pit moment. It's really unnerving. Okay. So it's become real in Byron Bay. The author's sister was told by not one but two different COVID positive people She and her family, with a baby of 4 years old, were casual contacts. One of the contacts was from a preschool. And New South Wales had dropped the ball in easing restriction and mandates on tracing. I have questions with the federal election not far away. Voters will be fearful of the unseen threats and persuaded by the Prime Minister that he is a strong leader and protect us from unseen forces. Given the strong spend and defence of all our voters, turn to the government's method of distraction, thwarting attention from the crisis evolving from the evolving pandemic. Now that's real. What New South Wales did is going to be the shittest show for the rest of this nation. They just gave up. The biggest populated part of this country just gave up. It gave up on dealing with COVID. Jeez. So, Anthony Albanese suggested boosters be brought forward. He was accused by Greg Hunt of being utterly irresponsible, utterly inappropriate, utterly unworthy of somebody who wants to be PM. Greg Hunt had to revise his comments and take it all back. Why does that matter? Well, because now the advice is 4 months. And they don't have enough booster shots for everyone, because being a responsible government would mean that you would be prepared, right? Like you should be for the bushfire season and many other things. This government isn't interested in originally getting enough vaccine for this country, organising enough masks and PPE for the particular hospitals. This government isn't interested in any of that. So when Greg Hunt was confronted by Anthony Albanese and told, hey, not only do you have to move the amount of time that you get the boosters to now 4 months, but you don't even have enough boosters for people to get done. Sit down, buffhead, you idiot. So Greg Hunt, I've heard that might be on his way out. I don't know if that's true. But even if he isn't, what an appalling show. They always do these mass exodus from the LNP in the lead up to an election. So take that with however you will, but it's not great. Hunt just announced a 3-month gap for the booster shot. We are woefully incapable of meeting this moment with booster shots. So if you've got a relative that you're trying to protect and you've got New South Wales just going, hey, not on me. You don't get to call me out. I'm really, really sorry. It's going to get bad and fast. The pandemic doesn't care if you're left or right. Doesn't care if you have a stance on wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. It doesn't care on whether you intended to get the booster shots and there weren't enough. It's going to do its thing. And unfortunately, you're going to get caught in the crossfire. And it shouldn't. Kudos to the Premier of Tasmania for taking on the Premier of New South Wales, refusing to mandate masks for a basic protective measure to reduce the soaring number of cases. Looks like New South Wales are going to be the super spreaders like the Ruby Princess, Delta, and now Omicron. That's sad. And you've got other liberal states going, hey, wait a minute, you intended to just sort of go, hey, let it rip. This can't be the position of a real government. From what I'm hearing, that in 2023, New South Wales is up for another election. You need to smash them out of the park. These Conservatives have got to go, guys. All of them. Only all of them that don't take this stuff seriously. It matters. This stuff matters now like it matters then. But in another really weird moment of COVID news, St. Vincent's Hospital, Sydney Path last night incorrectly messaged more than 400 people, advising them that they had tested negative to the COVID-19. These people tested positive to COVID-19. So there are now 400 people thinking that they tested negative to COVID-19 when they were in fact positive. Walking around New South Wales like, no, I don't have COVID. God help us. God help us. The gall of these people. So now they're apologizing for their error, and they're sincerely apologizing to all those impacted. Yeah, what are they going to do about the dead? So, what's going to happen about booster shots? If I was you, I'd be calling your local members and asking, secure us enough to get this done, and make them pressure the Prime Minister to get you enough to get it done. But I have different news for you. In a year of deception, one voice stood out. Grace Tame is Crikey's Person of the Year. Her moment of just class and amazingness has shown us all that Australia is a brilliant place and has brilliant minds, even if we have an idiot running it. That part's important to me. Even if we take the stance of, well, had to be someone kind of thing, to run this country. I wish it was someone like Grace Tame. In a year characterised by outright lies, much of Grace Tame's impact has been simply telling the truth. Her first own harrowing truth detailed a clear-eyed account of what was done to her as a child by an adult who should have been able to trust. Of course, before that was a fight to be able to share the truth at all. For years, she was illegally prevented from speaking about the case, while her abuser was free to have chummy interviews with Bettina Arden. After the success of her work alongside Nina Furnell, many others led her Speak campaign. She was made Australia's Australian of the Year for 2021 for being an outspoken advocate for survivors of sexual assault, using her voice to push for legal reform and awareness about the impacts of sexual violence. Tame told Crikey earlier this month that she had made no conscious decision to approach the role as Australian of the Year any differently from anyone else. She simply spent the year being her true self. She stood on the podium next to the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Tame surely couldn't have known what was to come. In retrospect, oh, geez, I touched them. Oh, hold on. Sorry, that just some pop-ups. Though perhaps there was clues. First conclusion in her speech. Tame gave a clear statement of purpose. I remember him saying, "Don't make a sound." Well, hear me now, using my voice, amongst a chorus of voices that will not be silenced. The second clue came from Morrison, who apparently gave a truly baffling yet characteristically tone-deaf response. I shit you not. He leant over, right in my ear, and goes, "Well, gee, I bet it felt good to get that out." Jeez. Jeez, just absorb that. This, of course, was before the revelations that the alleged rape of the Liberal Party staffer, Brittany Higgins, in Parliament House, that sent Scott Morrison to check in with his wife about what he ought to stand on things. Indeed, Michael Bradley already sketched the historical moment that was to erupt in the weeks that followed and placed Tame occupied in it. In early March, she gave a National Press Club address in which she was asked about Morrison's response. It shouldn't have taken children to have a conscience, and actually, on top of that, having children doesn't guarantee a conscience. That was Grace Tame. For her trouble, inevitably, the media's free speech warriors took aim. By May, the government announced the urgent review of the Australian Day Council, although it denied a direct link to Tame. The shifting dynamic in public life, of course, cannot be ascribed to any one person, and it's important to mention a bravery of crikey readers. The second place for the person of the year and Tame's own choice, Brittany Higgins. And the event of the year are built on the work of advocate survivors going back many years. If there's one theme in Tame's speeches and recruitment, they need to make a noise. It's the importance of collective and ability of a single domino to make a huge impact. Tame's own influence on the 2021 is perfect example. Higgins has said Tame inspired her to speak up, and from there it went on in the March for Justice, sustained by reporting on and revealing the cesspool of culture in Parliament. The release of reports in governments that would happily never commission in the first place, yet women coming forward in high-profile resignations. The progress was incremental but imperfect. A few rocks thrown at the statue Clave's feet, but in progress it was. And it cannot be stressed enough, as Tame does, that as any progress relies on a lot of people in the events of 2021, simply unthinkable without her exemplary courage. We'll leave you with her own words, which wielded with such precision and fearlessness all in a year, concluding her powerful national press conference address. It one voice, your voice. Our collective voices can make a difference. We are on the precipice of a revolution whose call to action needs to be heard loud and clear. Let's keep making noise, Australia. That was beautiful. And Grace Tame, if you ever get a moment to hear this, congratulations. You not only earned it, but you earned it for the right reasons, because you are a wonderful advocate for people in that position. Next, I need to go back to what should be a satire piece, but isn't. Christian schools want the right to be able to discipline and fire divorced LGBTQ plus staff. Christian education groups say the religious schools would be disciplined or even fire a teacher if it becomes divorced or gay. Christian education groups have defended the right to discipline or even fire a teacher who becomes divorced, cheats on their spouse, or enters a non-heterosexual relationship. Speaking at a parliamentary inquiry on Tuesday, the Christian School in Australia and the Australian Christian High School Alliance said faith-based schools should be able to selectively hire staff who reflect the school's religious belief. When asked about how the religious schools might when asked about the religious schools might treat staff members who divorce. CSA policy head Mark Spencer said the employee could potentially be fired for contradicting the school's values. Yeah, because being gay is a school not a school value. No, that absolutely needs to be challenged. Where in the Bible does it say, I get to be as awful as horrible, and I get to be, this is why they want that bigger bill so badly. The fact that they were divorced or may not have been, depending on the full context of how they responded, impacted their employment. Mr. Spencer told the inquiry on Tuesday. It really is impossible to be clear on that. You could have a range of situations where, depending on how they responded, whether that was suitable fit for the school anymore. Christian education groups say religious schools should be allowed to discipline or even fire a teacher who becomes divorced, cheats on their spouse, or enters a non-heterosexual relationship. Christian education groups also said that the controversial comments come amid significant disagreements across the political spectrum about the impacts of the bigot bill. Call it anything else, and I will call you a liar. It is a bigot bill. And I have a child. I have 2 children that are in that community. For the love of God, don't let this be the last word that they hear. They're going to be hearing from me. Oh my word, they're going to be. They can't point to me as a reason why that bigger bill needs to pass, nor can they ever say to me that it is. Breathe. They cannot come up with a reason that being that unreasonable is necessary. They cannot say, hey, you now like a woman and you're a woman, therefore I get to fire you. Or, hey, I had an affair, I get to fire you. Or, I got divorced and I was abused, I get to fire you. They are not the antithesis of how they deal with this. If they were, they would have fronted up to that Royal Commission with bells on, being exactly honest about what they were doing to children. They have no position with children that I want to hear from. Or anyone else. They did so much harm for no good. There isn't a verse that they can throw at me. They go, no, we should be able to be mean to people. Because there isn't not only is that book a constant contradiction, but show me where it says I can be mean to people. It's not. It's not. And God help anyone if they ever said anything to me from the religious groups about my children. There would be hell to pay. Look, I had the privilege of growing up in a different environment where I was, non-religious, and my mum would take me to like Mardi Gras and stuff, and I had this wonderful family that embraced that kind of thing. So I did that with my children. They still had issues, they were still very behind in the times at times, and I'd have to go, let's not talk like that, and you'd have to sort of do a couple of corrections. But I do not think overwhelmingly that this country needs to go backwards to appease a book that was written many, many eons ago, over 2,000 years ago. We have learnt so much as a nation since then. Going backwards is not an option. And I tell you now, if the Prime Minister wants to do that or anyone else, they're going to have a fight on their hands. Religious groups, you're on my shit list if you want this. And hey, I'm not afraid to name any organisation that supports such a thing, and nor should you. If you know of an organisation that outwardly discriminates against a community member because they got a divorce or had an affair or were part of the LGBTIQ plus community, you should speak out. At your chair at the Morning College, Principal Ross Clifford defended his school's decision to fire former teacher Karen Pack after she announced her plan to marry her female partner. He did it. Just fired her. See, he didn't even hide how awful he was going to be. Just went out with, fired her. It is a fairly significant position to be lecturing in a theological college, which is training and equipping people with Christian ministry, and actually in the context of living outside of the modeling. Hey, idiots. Want to know something from that group? The ACHA chair, ACHEA. You're part of a group, right? Let's be absolutely clear. You're part of an idiot group that told people how to live morally, but yet you couldn't even be moral enough to let the woman keep a job. You didn't fire her because she did it bad. No. You fired her over a personal life. Keep that in check. It's disgusting. Okay. The committed Baptist said the employment impacts a teacher's divorce and would be considered a case by cases and would be determined by the school's individual value system. So in the buddy man world, if the woman decides, hey, I just kind of don't want you to beat me anymore and I want a divorce, sign Ara to a job too. This is who they want to be, and they want to be it openly. They openly want to be this awful. So understand that they're telling you outwardly. They don't want to just sit in the sidelines and say, haha, in whispering hallways, about how awful they want to be. No, they're going to tell you. They're going to outwardly tell you how awful they are. Do not be fooled by any interpretation of this other than that real reality that they want the right to be awful, and not just awful in some ways. They openly just named a teacher and her position at risk because she got married to a female partner. Every parent should have pulled their kid out after that and said love is love. I want my children to know one day they could play these tapes back and these streams back. And I want them to know, no matter who they love, no matter what they do or who they do it with, it doesn't change anything. Love doesn't know gender or boundaries like that. Do you think the reason that we have all these moral police, while they're not moral, is because they're trying to hide something like the Jerry Fall Juniors of the world? To actually have a teacher fired for marrying her partner, I mentioned her name, Karen Parks. I'm hoping that this woman has another job in another school because she wasn't fired for being negligent with the kids or or not sticking to the school curriculum. No, she was fired for purely working at a Christian school where they could fire her. No, in no place on this earth should that be a thing. Should you be fired? And this is why I talk about the bigger bill so much. This bigger bill would increase that right to be able to have this bigger bill in place. That can't be overlooked. This bigger bill wants to be able to find more of these Karens. Um, so when you're talking about Karen Pack and how she doesn't fit into your ethos. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. School Principal of that Moreton Bay. What college was it? I'm going to go back and find it. Okay. Morling College. Ross Clifford was the principal. He thought that that was entirely appropriate to fire his employee, not because she did anything wrong. No. She simply fell in love with a woman. That's right. That's what you want your teachers to be teaching your kids, right? To be horrible human beings, to say that if two people fall in love, regardless of gender, you get to be horrible to them. That's what they want the bigger bill for. Don't even play around with me. That's what it's for. They're not doing this bigger bill because they're trying to keep their ethos. No. Mask off, buddy. No. They want this bill to be awful. Not just a tiny bit awful either. They want the right to not just fire you from their jobs and sell you a cake. No, they want the outward right to mock you about it too. Have a listen to some of that bigger bill stuff. They openly want to be able to call you names in that process. Oh, no, they're not done there. Why? Because same-sex marriage was passed and they're mad. Their fees were hurt. It's 2021 and we're more concerned with the fees of a church. It's grotesque. And now a woman doesn't have her job because they just decided, hey, you know what? Gone. But the part that they say that she doesn't fit into their moral code, the teacher, like, yeah, not the truth of the matter is they didn't fit into anyone's moral code. They didn't fit into my moral code or any other ones. I know plenty of Christians that are like, love is love. You cannot put a label on all of that stuff. I would have pulled my kid the instant that they were like, no, we're not firing her because she did something wrong. We're firing her because she just decided to fall in love. That's no. But it gets worse. The story doesn't end there. They also want to look at if the person gets divorced because they want to take it on a case by case if a person gets divorced and the lifestyle of the partner that left them, because infidelity, whether that would be very different from divorce as well. So you have an affair, they want to fire you. You get a divorce, they want to fire you. This almost brings me to that system in there. I think it was, don't quote me, it could be, I think it's the Mormons that needed a witness to abuse before they actually did something. And typically they just moved them around from church to church. That was okay in their moral ethos. But two people that loved each other get fired? I mean, I really wish this article had have touched on where this woman is now. Because I would love to reach out and say, hey, you shouldn't have been fired from your job. And hey, that school should have every public funding available to it ripped out. Just ripped out, annihilated. Until it woke up to itself. Because nowhere in our law does it say that you can discriminate against people. And nowhere does it say that public funding is contingent on being that awful. Public funds should not be awarded, because let's face it, these Christian schools do get a lot of public funding, which it's debatable whether they should at all. But if they're going to have it, at minimum, do not fire people for being gay. And the very fact that this woman, I don't know if she'll be able to get another job. How can she describe losing her job? And then to get incrementally worse as it goes along. And then they say, well, she didn't kind of fit the moral part of it. And if she got divorced, if anyone gets divorced, we'll have a look at why they get divorced. And then we'll have a look at, if they have affairs and all that kind of thing, that it's inconsistent with their morals. Okay? It's inconsistent with your morals. Which morals? Because I can bet you most of them have covered up abuse. That's inconsistent with my morals and the public's morals. Why didn't that matter? Why didn't it matter that a lot of them didn't want to sign on to this mandatory telling, a public order of telling someone about the abuse that went on? The Hillsong Church held out for a long time. That very same church almost lost its ability to carry on a charitable status because they didn't want to, go, would tell someone maybe if, there's a kid being abused. They really didn't want to sign up to it. That's where we're at. They didn't even want to tell you. They just wanted to move them on to the next one. But if they found out a teacher's gay, they'd just fire him and move along and pretend like that's their big moral issue of the day. Shouldn't even get a dime of our money. But because that's such a serious story, I need to move on to a lighter one. The shovel. Scott Morrison's wishes all Australians a Merry Christmas. From me, Jenna, and the whole image management team. I mean, that's funny on so many levels. But let me just go with these photo ops have not worked in the Prime Minister's best interest. I seen one where it was Photoshop where the Prime Minister looked like he was driving a tiny truck. I nearly died. Maybe it's my sense of humor. It's all off. But it was adorable. And it's like, no, it was bad. Because that's what he was. He was like a big kid in a truck going, I'm controlling everything. The whole fake tradie thing and putting on a hard hat and pretending like he knows what he's doing is hopeless. I love the shovel. Sometimes I do actual real news, which is another amazing part. In the midst of all of that, they were the only ones that were allowed to say things that were full on. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has bid Australians a safe and relaxing holiday from everyone at Scott Morrison is that just an average Aussie dad sort of look. Posing in a picture of himself and the kids are unsuspectingly caught on camera, just being themselves during a carefully managed photo shoot. Mr. Morrison said it was a special time to catch up with loved ones, as Mr. Morrison is standing on a ladder pretending like he's actually hanging the lights. Let alone did he know that a few minutes beforehand there was someone else caught putting up these things. It's like when he pretended to make a dog house and he had the jigsaw part on it wrong. It would have looked like he was going to cut the cord. I'm not a mechanics person. I mean, do these nails look like they've really done anything of substance? No. But even I could see that this whole chicken coop sort of fiasco was going to be a pretty bad idea. And that he didn't actually, if I spotted that, could you imagine like the real builders going, no, there's about 50 code violations here. Who took that photo? They clearly haven't done anything outdoors. I could see it. I don't even think I've ever nailed a nail straight, I've attempted it. I failed. And no, not just in high school as a full-blown adult. My husband had this job helping a mate build a little deck thing. And I was like, can I have a go? And he gave me like this piece of wood with another cut off from another piece of wood. And I thought, I can bang that in. I can really, really do it. And I thought about it and I thought, how do I keep it straight? And he's like, you're supposed to hold the nail with your hand. And I did that. I didn't exactly hit the nail on the head with the hammer. I kind of hit my hand a few times and then I wanted to move my hand and hit it. So it went in all crooked and then I cried about it. Lucky he only gave me a fake 2 bits of cut off of wood that he said I could construct. Imagine if he really wanted my actual help. I would have been hopeless. Since then, I don't have any skills. But even I could see the Prime Minister was utterly incompetent. So he said his family would be enjoying the traditional turkey for Christmas lunch before an advisor reminded him that fresh prawns had tested better in focus groups. What? I love the shovel. Oh yeah, that's right. There's nothing more fair dinkum rigidage than a dinky die than throwing a couple of prawns on the barbie, tucking into a glass of wine. Sorry, I always get that bit wrong. With a couple of bottles of Great Northern from your local Dan Murphy's. The PM said, like other families around the country, he'll spend Christmas Eve getting some staffers to set up the trampoline before posing in front of them and pretended like he built him himself. These things are bloody complex. The photo shooters, we had to do at least 8 different takes. These pictures of the Prime Minister aren't just painful on one level, they're painful on many. Not for the reasons that you're thinking. I could be you're thinking, it must be painful for his wife and kids whenever they appear in them. No, I mean painful in sense of looking at them, like physically looking at these pictures going, oh, there's no way. Did he really put that on? In one of them where he's sitting at the AFL, it looked like he wet his pants. Like the photographer didn't notice the lighting or whatever, and it looked like he actually wet his pants. And yes, I know about the Engadine Macca's thing. Would have been a nice little follow-on from that. If you don't know that story, Google it. I don't exactly want to go into the whole if the Prime Minister did a number 2 in the Macca's. I don't know if he did or he didn't, but the story sounds pretty believable for a Prime Minister that has been fired from every single job that he's had. And I'm hoping this election cycle will not falter in that thought that he will be fired from every job he's ever had. I want the Australian people to go to the polling places this election cycle and make that part count. Now, the reason I say that, I don't just say that because I want to see different government. I want to see different country. Look, I could hire a dog to do this better than the Prime Minister. He, from the inception of the pandemic, failed every test marker. From what you're supposed to do in lockdowns, to wearing a mask, to social distancing, to vaccination. But don't take my word for it, take theirs. Every time you see the Prime Minister posing at he even tipped his hat to anti vaxxers. So these photo ops that he's had in relation to COVID have even been disastrous, of him getting all these shots. Considering he even had like a photo op of him getting the booster shot, which I've got a real problem with. While most people are finding it difficult to get a booster shot, the Prime Minister proudly sits there in a chair, gets his booster shot, and then thinks you should wait. They don't care. They don't care. But even if Greg Hunt is on his way out and he's pretending like, he's going to lead office anyway, because I believe that they know that they're on their way out. And they've seen the writing on the wall. They can look at the poll numbers. They're not going to improve that. Or if they do, they'll do it in the month leading up to it. And they'll pretend like they're actually getting stuff done. At no point do they actually get stuff done. It's a claim that they make, which is utterly ridiculous. But this is where we are, people. So let's take a look in review of 2021. The year is almost over and another will soon begin. What price will Scott Morrison pay for not delivering on his promises? It's about to end, and we're going to talk about how dreadful it really was. As the world continues to have COVID-19 inflicted upon them, and the former new variants, hopefully the latest, the Omicron one, will prove as ineffective as the health authorities predict. So what that's talking about, if you're not caught up to date, the latest Omicron studies have shown it's not as deadly. But that doesn't mean that you do not get vaccinated. And I mean that. I wholeheartedly mean go and get vaccinated. Go and get your booster shots, even if they're saying Omicron isn't as deadly. This is still a deadly disease. And to pretend like this is not a serious situation is not being honest about where we're at. So the virus has now preoccupied the hearts and minds of men and women throughout the world for 2 long, atrocious years. 273 million cases have been detected with 5.3 million deaths. What an immeasurable heartache and suffering that has been thrust upon families. The mental and physical sorrow is unbearable, and the dying and desolate and the departing. How dreadful has its side effects? Economists have believed it's been shattered. The suffering has been born of at least to be able to fend for itself. Its destructive march has revealed those with a heart for the hard yakka, those willing to risk their own lives to help others. Yet, alarmingly, it has shown that a percentage of our population seemingly unknowing of their stupidity. Their changing tactics need to counter new variants and bring on unique problems. Now, as John Lord talks about this sort of stuff, which he is a member of this group, he is right. Is 100% right. So as he's making these observations to do with this, it's just alarming that it has been a mismatch of different world leaders, how they approach this. And the different ways that the world leaders approach this is super important, because it's inevitably turned out bad for some countries. For instance, when you look at the United States, even with the new president, he can't now turn around and go, hey, I want to lock down and I want to make sure that we get on top of this, because it got so out of control that he couldn't. So even with changing leaders, we're still going to have a bit of work up our sleeves do not think changing the leader from Scott Morrison to Albo is going to make it all magically better. But it definitely will make the healthcare system better. Definitely will fix the messaging coming out. And he definitely would order enough booster shots for everyone. So, as Alan Austin rightfully, John Lord rightfully points out that the way that we've dealt with this hasn't been great. The COP26 in Scotland yielded only half-hearted embrace of leaders. Many countries failed to make commitments that would keep the near the 1.5 degree target in the world citizenship. Only watch on as world leaders, so they insisted to retain power. Would they concede? Were they wrong? So that's to do with climate policy. We in Australia could only watch on as a man believing in things he couldn't see, touch, hear, made terrible decisions about things proven to him in the exact science discovered in the vaccine against COVID-19. As 1 week bleeds its way into the next and 2 weeks into months, seasons change, but surely the circumstances converge into convenience to us that our leader, Scott Morrison, told too many lies. See, even the mainstream media had to outwardly say, hey, you know what, he's lied. And he didn't just lie a little, he lied a lot. And he's not just lying about things that are like I stole a Tim Tam. No, he's lying about things like vaccine. He's lying a thing about lockdowns and masks. And he's tipping his hat to some very dangerous groups. Why? Because he can see a market in it. He can see the attention Craig Kelly is getting and Clive Palmer. And he wants in and he wants their money. So a good way of getting hold of Clive Palmer's money is by saying the utterly ridiculous and repugnant things like, hey, just let a virus sort of do its thing. And booster shots, who needs that? But if you keep in mind, Clive Palmer did spend a lot of money on hydroxychloroquine as well as Twiggy Forrest. So two of his main donors spend money on a drug that is not proven for treatment for COVID-19. That's madness. Why would you want anything to do with that money? But conservatives don't care. And they will take money from anyone regardless of their ridiculous stances on a disease. Remember, Clive Palmer lost his court appearance with WA Premier Mark McGowan because he wanted to go into Western Australia when he shouldn't have. This is, so if you're wondering why the Prime Minister is, he also signed on to this thing to attack Mark McGowan. So if you're wondering the reason that the Prime Minister was like, I'm going to help Clive Palmer, because Clive Palmer has helped him many, many, many times. And Clive Palmer used to be a Liberal. Same as Craig Kelly that he's taken. Same as Pauline Hanson. All of these ones pulling these grifts right now, part of it. So he can fully tip his hat in his way of saying, no, I can be as crazy and nutso as I want to be, because being sane and rational isn't going to cost him anything, because when the mainstream media is going to hold him accountable. I mean, it would take an amazing moment of our media to go, no, actually, it's pretty stupid. Have a look at the headlines where Dan Andrews goes in place to implement more of a mask mandate and everything else as the country opens up. And they consider it more of a slap in the face that he does that. Meanwhile, Dominic Perrott in New South Wales decides no masks, no contact tracing, and QR codes are gone. And apparently that's great for the people in New South Wales and the rest of the country. So they make no mistake that the Murdoch media is openly out for this death culty kind of mentality too. So if you're wondering why the Prime Minister isn't taking this serious, it's because his biggest donors aren't. The people who will want to win him the next election aren't. So if Murdoch's not taking it seriously, and you hear the way that they talk about it in the States and how they've heavily funded that, they're not going to take it seriously here. They're not going to take it seriously because of the things that Pauline Hanson voters and Clive Palmer voters and all of that. And there's enough of these crazies for them that might be able to tip over the line, because people are voting. I can understand some of the frustration, right? But you can't tip your hat to the crazy. I can be frustrated at my everyday, but I can't tip my hat and go crazy. I have to still get up and do things. I still have to make sure everyone is bath dressed and organised. I can't just choose not to. I can't go, no, sorry, I really feel like just not doing that, and I get to do whatever I want. No. Why? Because I'm responsible. I'm head of my household. I have to. Scott Morrison is the leader of this country. He cannot just decide, hey, I'm going to tip my hat to these loony bins for the day. But you know what really amazed me is the amount of left-wingers that bought into it. And the amount of trolling I received over it. That was shocking. 2021 proved to be the biggest disinformation. There were so many people that claimed to be doctors that were like chiropractors and orthopedic people and just people that had nothing to do with virology at all, pretending to be experts and waving around these degrees, pretending like they knew what they were talking about in relation to this virus. No, sorry, that's not a thing, and I'm going to follow my GP and I'm going to follow the science. And so should you. This isn't something that you're going to hear, the mainstream media say, because that's not what Rupert Murdoch's saying. He's saying, no, you'll be fine. The 5 million deaths are fine. He truly thinks it's fine. He got his booster shots. He ran away to the UK to do it. You watched him, you watched him hop on his little private plane. He was right. He can jump the queue anywhere he wants. He can be on a private island. He's not going to care. And you have a look at him dancing around about it. And not just a little, no. They're outwardly saying that the solution to beating the virus is more deadly than the actual virus. They're not just sort of leaning in and out a little. No. They're fully nutso into it. Like, leant in, licked it, and then went, oh, maybe I went too far this time, when they got caught with their little ethos papers. Yeah, that's right. Fox News was caught with an ethos binder that said everyone had to be vaccinated. Oh, and if you want to fight mandate on that, you need to get tested every day against COVID. Oh, yes. Now, they had a harder mandate than any of the premiers, any of the prime ministers, all of them. Same as the states. So while they're openly rallying and then going, why should you be mandated to do that? His own officers mandated it. Didn't just mandate it, demanded it. Dude. They had the longest stay-at-home period for any other workplace. Every other workplace but the Prime Minister's office rocked up. Not Fox News. No. They did it in the back, in their basements. One of the major problems that the LNP are facing is the loss of our international standing amongst members of the OECD. Yeah, I've looked at this. Thank you for this response, because I've looked at this. We're continuously being placed at the back of the pack. If you have a look at the speech Scott Morrison gave, I don't know how many of you caught it, But wasn't it amazing to see that he like delivered this speech to an empty room? Even conservatives know that their time is up on climate change. Like super conservatives like Boris Johnson. They know. They absolutely know. Do not be fooled into thinking that these people aren't fully aware of what their position is on climate change. Places that are small European countries, they know. They know the water will be lapping at their doors and they know that they got no choice but to make action. This is why England isn't bucking away from it. Even its conservative nature is like, no, we 100% have to do something about this. This isn't like a maybe not. No, they fully said we better do something. And they're not pointing to China and then going, wow, they doing something like America and Australia is. No, they're actually going, hey, let's build a fleet of electric cars and let's or put solar on the roof and have a couple of water tanks out the back. So they know. These little European nations know. Like, how about, I want to say that Macron is left-leaning, but he's really not that left-leaning. He has a few conservative values. So when I tell you that he takes this stuff seriously, oh yeah, he takes it seriously. Angela Merkel in Germany, she not only takes this stuff seriously, the Chancellor of Germany, she not only takes these topics seriously, but she has full on like scientific meetings about this. She actually has a scientific background, so she's very intelligent. Like when the COVID thing started, she knew things like no other leader, and she informed her people from a professional standpoint. She was the only leader that I know of, that I heard, that actually gave a speech that sounded like she was the chief medical officer. It was quite amazing. She does the same with climate change. It is amazing. Jacinta Ardern won't even have our subs in sorry, in her ocean. So these subs that we'll get in 25 years are not allowed to be in the New Zealand oceans. Anyway, do I really believe that we're going to get subs? Are they going to be like useful in that time frame? No. But I think it's important to note that our idiot Prime Minister thinks that they're useful and that he can throw money at and he can give all these envoy jobs to whoever he wants to in these systems. But make no mistake, it isn't just the media that's behind Scott Morrison when they're having these conversations about climate change or whatever. There is something else I want to discuss. If you know of any business that is outwardly supporting this Prime Minister that's having these weird photo ops with him, don't support him. Openly take a moment to talk about him online. Openly say that you do not earn my money because you're supporting a criminal in action. A man who did not take a pandemic seriously. A man who wanted to cut off financial support to those who needed it the most. Oh yeah, he legit was going to do it, like way before even he wanted to. Way before he even told people about it. He was having those like little secret meetings going, no, kind of, you want the country to open up now. He was pushing to cut all them supplements back long. He only wanted to do it for like a month. He had no business doing it, which is why he didn't, take the Ruby Princess saga seriously, why he didn't take any of this stuff seriously. Do not be fooled into thinking that this guy knows what he's doing. So we need a big list to watch. The charities and the businesses that host Morrison during the election campaign and give them a location to drop photo ops. So we know to avoid them because they're supporting conservative values. Now, If they want their bigger bill, fine. We'll do it in a way that discriminates openly against businesses. They want a right to discriminate, fine. We'll use that against them. Do it with our pockets. We don't have to spend money in a place or support a place that supports him. So if you know of a business that's doing that, saying, I'm not going to have anything to do with that, only because this is the rules that they want to play by. They want to have a bigger bill that openly says to LGBTIQ plus people, hey, we should be able to say awful things to you and fire you and whatever else. So let's fight back. Let's fight back in a way that we know how to. And let's do it with our money. And let's do it with telling people. And we're going to go, you want to support the LNP? Cool. My money isn't going towards you. And I'm telling everyone I know, you openly support the criminality of this Prime Minister. And if you're wondering about why I call him a criminal, if you have a look at the amount of rorts and things that he's pulled off, oh yeah, it's definitely criminal. It's criminal. Well, why do you think they're so scared of a federal ICAC? These are real crimes that they're doing. Only Labor is committed to doing it. And I mean doing it with teeth. I mean, Labor even talks about it in terms of if it gets their own ranks, it gets their own ranks. They're pretty brutal about it. I was talking to one insider about it from the ALP branch, and they were saying could catch a couple of them. I might. Craig Thompson is going through stuff right now. Granted that he got shafted in 2014 and they were like, no, we don't want anything to do with you. And the fact that Eddie Obeid has a pass with them as well. So they were Labor insiders were like, there is a good chance it'll probably get a couple of them too down the line. They're not shy about talking about the fact that there could be corruption amongst their ranks. But they're saying that's the price that they're willing to pay to get rid of it. But I think that's the realistic point of view, is that even Labor is saying, hey, we might have some dodgy dudes and they might get caught up in this, but that's not the point. The point is that it gets seen to, that it doesn't exist as this big entity of corruption. There were other Labor insiders that had this strategy in talking about editing how they talk about money. And I was like, that sounds a bit dodgy at first. And I was like, why are you discussing it like money? And then they were like, well, because if federal ICAC comes through, basically all brown paper bags are off the table. And I'm like, well, wouldn't you want that to be a good thing? And they're like, well, yeah, we want that for everyone. But the LNP have better brown paper bags. Basically, they're saying that the LNP gets so much more and get away with it. And the insider was sort of saying, it happens, and they know it happens, but the ALP doesn't get as much. So, for instance, an example was brought up to me about how Sam Dastiari had $1,500 from a Chinese donor. No. This very same Chinese donor hands Julie Bishop $500,000. Which one lost their job? Sam Dastiari. No, because while they're talking about over here and saying, look over here, Sam Dastiari got $1,500. You got Julie Bishop getting $500,000 from the same dude. No big headline, no big Shanghai moment, of Julie Bishop. There was no big nickname for him, for her. See, the Prime Minister tried to deny that he called Sam Shanghai Sam until he was reminded repeatedly. These are some of the really big lies that I need you to sort of know that are happening and deal with it. I need you to go out there and say, hold on. ALP will have an ICAC and it'll have teeth and it's going to get some of them. But remember, with the way that the media behaves, see, if we had a New South Wales ALP Premier and if ICAC came knocking on the door, the media would be like, yes, we got him, it was awesome. But because it's an LNP person, they're now questioning the level of how ICAC should function. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? No. See, this is what I love about Labor. Labor's like, hey, yeah, no, that dodgy dude, they should go. Like, when Sam was told he should go, they were like, yeah, okay, fair call, you got him. The $1,500 looked bad. No one looked around at Julie Bishop and went, hey, $500,000 looks bad. Not just looks bad, it is bad. No one came after Gladys Liu or any of those. So each time when I hear a Labor person with trepidation say in their voice, yeah, but, I understand why they're saying it. Because they know that while they got this $1,500 scam, there's a person on the LNP with $500,000, and Labor will walk away over $1,500. The $500,000 is a promotion for the LNP. So yeah, I get it. So when these inside sources say to me little things like, oh yeah, it's happening, and I'm not sure how it's going to go down, I'm looking at him in awe and saying, all right, this might catch you, but how about we clean up what you're doing? And then they're like, yeah, sure, lots of them would like to, but lots of them are underfunded too. So this is also another problem. ALP funds aren't as heavy in funding as the LNP. So remember that their revenue isn't as high. They don't have like the top 1%ers handing over millions of dollars, like Clive Palmer, that will just outwardly lie to you. They would invent any lie to tell you to vote for the LNP. Labor doesn't have that. So what I want to do is I want to talk about, helping your local ALP person get elected, in terms of whether you fundraise for them, do the phone lines, or just do the helping them at the election booth on how to vote. The reason I want to discuss it like that is because the ALP is not funded the same way. And which leads me into why they're so big on cleaning up the corruption too. Because there's no way that if ALP did half the things that the LNP did, that they would get away with it. And that's clear. It's not just a little bit clear, it's stark, ravingly clear. So ALP's like, fine, there might be complicit media that lets the LNP off, but a watchdog won't. There might be a public that accepts some of this ridiculousness, but ICAC won't. There might be this moment where, even if you have a look at Victoria knows that their leader is under IBAC inquiry. Do you know that he's been under inquiry since 2018? Do you know that they do not have a link yet between Dean Andrews and any wrongdoing or anything that he could have benefited from in that process? Do you know that at that point he could have drastically defunded that IBAC process? They call it IBAC in Victoria. It's different. So why did they do that? They didn't defund any of it. Instead, they built it up and built it up and built it up. And they gave this investigation group more money. Not because they wanted it to be any other way than investigate it and quickly. So they could clear people more quickly. They could bring in a bigger team that does lots more to make it more concise. Dan Andrews doesn't care that they're looking into him. In fact, I remember hearing him say that's their job to do that oversight. Anastasia said something similar. But if you hear Gladys Berejiklian should tell you that it was all a witch hunt, that they were all out to get her. I bet each year that she was incrementally stealing money from it. Robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. It's unconscionable. That tells you where they take corruption. You can see how each party handles it, not just on a state level, but on a federal level. And you can see it, you know. And I think that that's super duper important as we're leaning into this election cycle, that you tell people, hey, hold on. If Labor isn't serious about that, why do they keep funding these programs? Why do they keep wanting to boost these programs? Why do you think that they want you to know if something bad happens? Like, do you know how many Labor people come out to say when Craig Thompson was caught and said, hey, not only did we kick the dude in 2014 and we thought something was shady, but we'll go on the record and say, no, that's shady. They can't even get one person from the LNP to say anything that they've done is shady. Bonking Barnaby can't even get someone to go, hey, that APRA movement of the scientists to try and get them to all move to Armidale, that was shady. Or, that Great Barrier Reef Fund, that was shady. Or the car park deal, that was shady. They never quite get there over the line. It's amazing. It is amazing to watch. So if someone tells you that they don't know the difference between the parties, that is a pretty stark difference to start with. But let me put it this way. Not only have Labor been the only party to create Medicare and all that other stuff, Labor's been the only party to make sure that it gets real funding. It doesn't see how the LNP do it, and they pretend like it's always getting record funding, is the year before, just before it's like doing all its numbers, they'll rip all its money up, and then they'll restore part of it, and then they get to call it record funding because it's record funding for that year. How dodgy. So if you go back through the financial records, you can actually see that it's actually not gotten as much money as what it had in previous years. But because it's record funding in that time, they get to go, no, it's the biggest it's ever been. It's not true. But they get to keep claiming that because there's really no law on making that statement. And even fact checkers are going, oh, it's partly true because they partly put it back. It's dodgy to its core. It's corrupt. It's nothing but utter corruption. Think of it like this, right? Labor will not only refund Medicare, but they want to make sure that the doctors and nurses are funded. And they've made a very big commitment to see frontline workers protected. In fact, even unionised. Looking at Anthony Albanese's page of talking about unions is incredible. And he wants bigger protections for them. He wants bigger protections for even people on apprenticeships. He was talking in one interview about apprenticeship people getting more coverage, so when it's over, they can't just get fired so that employer can get another apprentice and get subsidies for them. It's talking about those types of protections. These aren't things that should be missed. So we're not just talking about a change of government, we're talking about a change in stark ways of how we handle the economic front as well. That'll change the landscape. So if you have to hire that person, you can't just fire them once the apprenticeship is over after training them up. And, you have to really pay them a working wage. That's going to change how the economy handles these casual workers. Because one of the things that Labor talks about is casual workers and how they're treated awfully. And how he'd like to see full-time work in real full-time employment wages. So, you don't hear the LNP talk about stuff like that. In fact, if you have a look at what their ethos kind of is, it's to slash and grab everything they want from it. They wanted to cut, they cut penalty rates and everything else. They're not interested in your take-home pocket. But they will tell you that Labor taxes more and everything else, which is an outward lie. But it doesn't matter because in an election cycle, they don't have to tell the truth. These aren't just some differences, they're stark differences, they're worlds apart. But then you have the meddling Greens that step in and pretend like they're doing the right thing. You know, particularly here in Queensland when they ran against Jackie Trad, the most environmentalist person ever, and they ran hate campaigns against her. So this isn't like it was coming from one front, it came from several. So I'm watching the Greens this time. And I have no problem coming for any Green member that wants to pretend like they're environmental. Because after what they did to Jackie Trad, being the most environmental in Queensland, they no longer get that title of being environmental. You don't get to kick out an environmentalist. And then go, hey, I'm all about the green. No. They openly helped the LNP to steal a seat. Unbelievable. So the Greens are on a bit of my shit list right now. I would like to see that they improve. They have time to fix this, but they can't just be agitators. They can't just be that I've got a better policy than ALP, so vote for me. Because overall, not only can they not lead, but they cannot come with any meaningful policy that can be enacted without ALP signing onto it. No, that's not how. So basically, they're a party that gets to say that they can do all these things, but without actual no power. So what they do is they openly agitate against ALP that's doing the right thing. If they had half the balls against that, that's what they do against the ALP, against the LNP, we wouldn't be in this position. If they just stuck it out and not openly riled against ALP, would be in a way better position. But it's not their ball game right now. Not that I've seen yet. So I want the Greens to openly come out. And I want them to show real love this time for the ALP. And I want them to finally freaking acknowledge that without the ALP, they cannot get a damn thing passed. Because the LNP isn't going to help them at all. So their only true passing of legislation will come through the ALP. So it's really time that they sort of bent the knee a little and went, okay, I get it. Because every other party has to do that. Think about it. Clive Palmer could not get a damn thing done in Parliament without bending the knee to the LNP. They sort of did it for each other in a good way. And they seemed to sort of work out some really dodgy deal where Clive would hand over money, and then that would be like the quid pro quo, as it will, which is a word I've become very familiar with from the Trump era. So if we can work out with the Greens a good deal where they actually understand that some of their policies are great, fair call, hand it to them. But if they truly want to be effective, they have to work within the ALP ranks. They just have to. Because they're in this two-party basis. But even if it wasn't two-party preferred, right, you wouldn't want this third entity to pop up anyway, because that would most likely be Conservative. Because the larger point of independence is Conservatives. They're all like Conservative spin-offs. So keep in mind as you're watching this shit show of these independents that are mostly like the new Liberals that are pretending to be this party for everyone and everything else. Keep in mind that this is something that, as they're all doing this, they're all going to pose as something. If you notice, these new Liberals are trying to steal a lot of ALP policy. They have zero power to move mountains or anything. But this is the way that the Liberals will garner votes, by pretending like the new Liberals that are going to hand the Conservatives the votes anyway. I've got some power. No, there's no point to these independents. There just isn't. Because only one of two parties can work it out. And overall, the main power ends up going to the Conservatives, because they get these weird coalitions like with the Nationals or the Tea Party. If you know the history of what they do, you know that they garner independence for Conservatives. This doesn't work in an ALP thing. But the ALP doesn't just do deals either. They don't just sort of go, hey, we're outwardly doing, these sorts of deals. And if you notice, the ALP won't be wedged this time. It won't be wedged on the bigger bill. It won't be wedged on vaccination, lockdowns, or anything else. They've got their position. It's set in stone. And with this bigger bill, Labor's plan was brilliant. If you didn't catch it, it was brilliant. It was basically, even your own side doesn't like the bigger bill, but let's have an independent commission look at the bigger bill. So this way, even the Christians that were like, they didn't say anything bad about it. They didn't say anything good either. So it kind of made it look like they were sitting on the fence, but inside sources have actually said, no, that thing's not even getting up. It's not even getting up amongst Liberal Party ranks. Inside sources will tell you openly that no, there's no chance that bigger bill will get by, and it's just a way to garner votes for if they want to go to the next election. What the idea is in the Conservative think tank is, here's the plan. Run up to the election very quickly, scream at people, I'm going to give you freedom. Freedom to be horrible. And everyone looks at it and then goes, freedom to be horrible, eh? There's a certain amount of public that likes to be a little bit evil, hence why there's still a jailing system in this country. Not all of them are evil enough to end up in a jail, but it exists, it's real. So in that ideology, there will be this like feverish pitch of it running up to the end of the election cycle. And the LNP are going to be like, hey, Christians, you want the right to say terrible, terrible things. And people on the inside track of the Liberals, now, if you know how they work, they do have what I'll call factions. They do have like people that realize that they're in not safe seats. So they come up to me and they go, no, that's not gonna fly. That's gonna kill us. We're gonna lose our seats. But that's not the plan. The plan isn't to get it passed. The plan isn't to get it over to the election cycle. Because why wouldn't they have already passed it? Why would they only have 10 sitting days of Parliament? That's right, 10. With not even a written thing of putting that bill there. It's not written down to be put into legislation. No, it's just done to hyperventilate these people. Greens leader Brown Malign, Di Natale, all thought Labor is the easier market than compared to the LNP. Yeah, Natale was hostile more to Labor than anybody else. Been exactly the same. Yeah, I found this too. Look, I get why this happens. I get it that it's easy to go for the left-leaning seat. But be a little bit ambitious this time, Greens. Go out there, fight the LNP, and give it all you got, because this is your one chance to show this damn nation we matter more than anything. That the LNP really is the demagoguery that we've all been alarming to, that we've all sent signals out and then gone, hey, this is bad, don't do this. And that is ultimately the end goal here. As we're in this run up to this election for it to be, sending out the bat signals of conversation. Do keep in mind the Greens and Labor have a choice where they can run to this election, scream it out, enough is enough. These Conservatives have done enough. And I can hear Labor screaming it. You can hear Labor every day going, no. They did not thank the frontline workers. They did not thank the people that are the people that have been dealing with this pandemic on the ground level. You can tell that they're like, they do not have a good environment policy. The LNP do not have a good environment policy. They do not have policy that helps you. So that's important. I want the Greens to come on board. I have wanted this union, sort of like the LNP for years. I've been tipping my hat and leaning into it for years. Since 2013. I'm not going to lie to you, there's no point because my comments are all there. You can see it. It's outward. I'm not going to lie to you. There was this moment where I felt a little bit of jubilation when Julie Gillard was Prime Minister and thinking we could actually all work together and sing Kumbaya. Then reality bit me on the ass and I seen them do a deal with Tony Abbott that repealed the carbon emissions scheme. I cried like a baby. And the ugly cry, the one where you're like, I just can't stop. Watching that was awful. And I lost every hope that I had that they were ever about the environment. They can make any shitty excuse they want for that deal. But that's when I woke up and I realized I'm in a lot of trouble here and I don't know a way out. And this country needs someone that takes this stuff seriously. Anyway, that's 2 hours of wonderful time talking to you guys. I hope to see you next week. I will have a new setup soon, I promise, where I'll be able to share my screen with you and everything will be wonderful. And I'm hoping that one of you will get the guts to jump up here and chat to me, because I think your voices are more important than mine. I'm just the one with the weird camera angles and says, things in very big speech. I think your voice is the one that I'm wanting to hear the most. And I think that where you fit is where I fit. And without you, there isn't a point to me doing this. So I think you are the reason I keep doing it. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this around. This is super important because as we're running up to this election, and do not take this as anything other than a sprint. This is a sprint. This is a race. Yes, Labor detests treachery and have witnessed it from the ground. Yeah. In this election race, this is real. I have a little sticker on my bin that says, with ScoMo on it, take this out next election. So I'm taking this seriously. I spent $18 on that and it's only a little. Okay, this is why you don't let me buy things online. I thought it would have been like half the bin. It's like a third. I'm like, I want it to be seen down the road, damn, and I want people to be reading that thing. So, and I spent $18 on it off some bubble place, Red Bubble or something. And I deeply regret that because I wanted it so much bigger. And I wanted everyone to know that I'm serious about this election. Oh, yeah, you can bet you're going to hear my voice. As the running jump of this goes, you're not just going to hear my voice here. You're going to hear my voice everywhere. I'm going to be everywhere. I'm going to be in people's minds as they're ticking that little box going, I heard her say that. So keep in mind that I will be on everyone's cases as the running jump of this comes to a flying moment for us all. Anyway, I better wrap this thing up because I've got apparently people waiting for me up there. So I want to thank you for another beautiful week. And I want you to join me here next week. And I want you to decide in the comments while I'm on air on what you want to talk about. I will give you an opportunity to say what you want to do. And what's your goals for the 2022 election? Because I think it's based upon what you think, not just what I think. Like, share, subscribe. See you next week, guys. Bye.